Donald Trump is a tariff-mad wannabe king right now, and he's making it clear to everyone in the country with the insane set of posts that he made this morning. But not just to everyone in the country, Donald Trump is specifically targeting Republicans in Congress who are just not doing what he wants, not going out of their way to save his tariffs, and so Donald Trump is declaring that their jobs just don't exist. Donald Trump doesn't have to worry about Congress or the courts. He is illegally declaring that he has emergency powers to do whatever he wants. And it is not because Donald Trump is trying to save manufacturing jobs or because America needs leverage or got ripped off. It's because he wants to continue his corruption. And that is where I want to start. The laundry list of examples of corruption of Trump and the Trump family that have happened because of tariffs before we get into Trump's attack on Mike Johnson, on the Supreme Court, and on his entire party in these insane posts about tariffs.
To truly understand why Donald Trump likes tariffs so much, I think you have to look at the Trump international real estate development currently underway in Vietnam. When Trump held what he called Liberation Day, as he called it, in April of last year, announcing his slew of proposed new tariffs, Vietnam was slated for some of the highest. Trump was threatening to put a 46% tariff on Vietnam. Now, at the same time, the Trump family real estate business was trying to get permission to develop a $1.5 billion new property in Vietnam. They basically wanted to build enough villas to house 35,000 residents, a 36-hole golf course, of course, theme parks, and a commercial district. Now, the approval process for something like that in Vietnam typically takes somewhere between 2 and 4 years. But somehow, last year, the Trump family managed to get the Vietnamese government to approve everything in just 3 months. Just 1 month after Trump threatened a 46% tariff on the country, Vietnam's central government short-circuited the process for the Trump family property. And legal experts described it this way to the Times, saying that to fast-track the Trump development, Vietnam ignored its own laws. Vietnamese officials have allowed the Trump project to break ground without completing at least a half dozen legally required steps, from securing all the land and financing to conducting environmental reviews. The government essentially forced the locals who lived or farmed on the land to sell, to clear the space for the Trump property. Now, in a letter obtained by the Times, Vietnamese officials explicitly stated that the project required special support from the top ranks of the Vietnamese government because it was receiving special attention from the Trump administration and President Trump personally. The Prime Minister of Vietnam himself even spoke at the groundbreaking. I mean, here he is with Eric Trump. Yeah, there he is. Now, at the time, the White House said that, quote, all of the president's trade discussions are totally unrelated to the Trump organization. Okay. And Vietnam's foreign ministry did not respond to questions about the project. But after all that, when it came time for Trump to actually implement the tariffs he threatened on his so-called Liberation Day, after the Vietnamese government had hustled and ignored their own laws to fast-track Trump's $1.5 billion project, what do you know? Trump dropped his tariff rate for Vietnam from 46% to just 20%. Gee, I wonder why. And if that example isn't clear enough for you, you could also look to Trump's tariffs on Switzerland, which I mentioned earlier. I mean, last August, Trump hit Switzerland with a 39% tariff, one of the highest tariffs in the world. Trump has since openly explained that his reasoning for that tariff was personal. He said that he made the tariff so high simply because the president of Switzerland, quote, rubbed him the wrong way. Now, in an effort to get that tariff rate cut down, Switzerland appeared to Trump personally. The Swiss sent a delegation of Swiss industry tycoons bearing gifts for Trump, a special Rolex desktop clock, there it is, and a personalized golden bar, valued at a little more than $130,000. Now, the White House says that Trump merely accepted the gifts on behalf of his presidential library, making them legal. But regardless of the legality, the charm offensive appears to have worked, because 10 days later, Trump cut Switzerland's tariffs from 39% to just 15%.
He is a mob boss. That is what Donald Trump is. And it's because he uses these tariffs to make himself seem like a big, strong, tough guy to, as he's said, threaten to destroy other countries, that Donald Trump feels especially weak right now, because this was the only tool he had to pretend that he commanded any respect on the world stage, something Donald Trump desperately craves. It's why he needs a medal. It's why he needs a trophy. It's why he needs a crown, because Donald Trump feels his insecurity and shows it very clearly. And he did when he decided to go on a rampage of posting this morning, saying he gets to just blow by Congress, saying he gets to disregard the Supreme Court. I want to talk about it all after we get through these 3 insane posts. Trump first wrote in a lengthy post, quite frankly, the Supreme Court will be using lowercase letters for a while based on a complete lack of respect of the United States accidentally and unwittingly gave me, as President of the United States, far more powers and strength than I had prior to their ridiculous, dumb, and very internationally divisive ruling. For one thing, I can use licenses to do absolutely terrible things to foreign countries. That sounds great, especially those countries that have been ripping us off for many decades, but incomprehensibly, according to the ruling, can't can't charge them a license fee, but all license charges fees. Why can't the United States do so? You do a license to get a fee. The opinion doesn't explain that, but I know the answer. The court has also approved all other tariffs, of which there are many, and they can all be used in, quite frankly, a much more powerful and obnoxious way with legal certainty than the tariffs as initially used. Our incompetent Supreme Court did a great job for the wrong people, and for that, they should be ashamed of themselves, but not the great three. Trump, continuing to tantrum, then went on to say, as President of the United States, I do not have to go back to Congress. Doesn't need to go back to Congress to, quite frankly, get approval of tariffs. It has already been gotten in many forms a long time ago. They were also just reaffirmed by the ridiculous and poorly crafted Supreme Court decision. So was it ridiculous and poorly crafted, or did it reaffirm you? Oh my God. But he continued. Trump capped it all off with, quite frankly, any country that wants to play games with the ridiculous Supreme Court decision, especially those that have ripped off the USA for years and even, quite frankly, decades, will be met with a much higher tariff and worse than that which they just recently agreed to. No one agreed to tariffs, Donald. Buyer beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President DJD. So that was incoherent babbling nonsense. I think we can all agree that that was a bunch of goop slop, and it didn't make sense at all. Is the tariff decision by the Supreme Court a real shame and the worst thing that's ever happened in the world, or does it now give you unlimited power to blow past Congress in taxing Americans illegally, which you said was signed off on a long time ago? We don't know by who, but both interrupted and bolstered by the Supreme Court. What is Donald Trump saying in any of this? I don't know. And that is kind of the point. He wants a vague emergency power to do whatever he wants to be his declaration. And what are you thinking if you're Mike Johnson? Of course, you're already, Donald Trump's little sock puppet, and he sticks his hand. I'm not going to tell you in which hole that is, so we're just going to put that back. But you already have no power, at least publicly. Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House in title only, right? Mike Johnson doesn't actually wield any of his own individual power. But now, how do you feel if you're a Republican in Congress? If you're John Thune in the Senate, with Republican senators unwilling to do anything to back Donald Trump's tariffs? He essentially just told you that you don't matter, that Congress has no power and no authority. Donald Trump is actively just declaring war on how our government operates because he feels so weak and insignificant. That is what this is about. Donald Trump sees tariffs as the best opportunity to bolster his businesses and act in the most corrupt ways possible. That is what this comes down to. That is what he is going to be missing when his tariffs are gone. So if you are a Republican in Congress, there has never been more incentive for you to rebuke Donald Trump. He is trying to strip you of every power that you have. And it's funny because the only times Republicans seem to be able to reckon with this, and it takes me back to, remember that J.D. Vance Turning Point USA event when he was had all those questions asked of him when he said he's upset about Usha's religion and a bunch of other weird shit. But he was asked a question, I believe it was about ICE, but it was just more broadly about the powers that Donald Trump has abused with his standing military and so many other things. And the question was essentially, Mr. Vice President, I love that Donald Trump is abusing the presidential powers to go after the people that I don't like because I'm a stupid bigot. That was the question. But what happens when it might be Gavin Newsom? What happens when it might be AOC, right? What happens when it might be some other Democrat as president or in Congress? Because Republicans are now talking about how we're going to expand the Supreme Court. Fucking hell yeah, we are. And we're going to pack that thing. It's going to be great. But they only understand that Donald Trump is abusing power when you flip it for the future. So they understand that the powers are being abused. So if you're a Republican who is going to worry about how a President Newsom, a President AOC, a President Ossoff, hell, President Plattner, we can talk about that a different day, but might be wielding these powers, then you might want to get stepping and call Donald Trump out. Now, I suspect that there will be lots of Democrats in our party who, once again, want to rehash the debate around the filibuster, around presidential powers. I don't know. That's not what I'm worried about right now. What I'm worried about is why Republicans aren't saying shit, because they're spineless. Of course, we know that. But never has there been a better opportunity for you to do so. It is both politically beneficial and advantageous for you to continue to do your job. But Donald Trump says we are blowing past Congress. We disregard them entirely. And again, it is because he wants to preserve his power to impose himself in the most illegal way possible. And it is what Gavin Newsom perfectly described in this clip right here.
Thanks. The Supreme Court struck down most of President Trump's tariffs this week. He's already using different authorities to impose a 15% global tariff, vowing to forge ahead even without Congress. What do you do?
Well, what does anyone do? Are you going to move your factory from overseas and onshore it with 150-day certainty on a 15% tax or tariff? I mean, the whole thing is a farce. I talk about petulance. It was 10% 2 days ago, maybe 20% tomorrow. I mean, this is madness. He's flailing. He's a punch-drunk boxer. He's just trying to hit anything, a shadow. And he's a shadow of himself. He's lost a step or two. Under the IEEPA, we were the first state to sue. I was out there in the Central Valley talking about how this is going to impact ranchers and small businesses and farmers, the ag community. My state, larger than any other state in the country. And Justice Roberts, by the way, basically, our arguments were literally laid out in detail in his response. So it was always an illegal act. He needs to return that money, he needs to refund that money with interest. He can do that in a nanosecond.
It is an illegal scheme that he is running to make money off of you and I. That is what is happening. And if Donald Trump does not end up sending that $175 billion in tariff revenue straight to his bank account, he's sending it to corporations. So we need to talk about that too. And we're going to on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. If you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Keep on fighting, y'all. Don't let them silence you. And until next time, I'll see you soon.